What's the most badass thing you've accidentally said in the heat of the moment? Big burly former Marine/mercenary from Iraq was back stateside. Huge beeping mountain of a man. We came to face each other in one of the narrow corridors of the office where one of us was gonna have to turn sideways. Neither of us turned. But we stopped. I'm 6 feet 1 inch 260 and he still towered over me. He was a nice guy. But still a little conditioned, I guess you could say, or mentally unhinged. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You feeling froggy?" It truly was like something out of a movie. Without blinking I replied, "You better jump." We both cracked up and turned sideways, while the office breathed a collective sigh of relief. I am a 4th grade teacher, and one day I was up at the board and struggling to remember how to spell a particular word. I was trying to make light of it, telling the kids that sometimes adults need help with spelling too. One student replied, "It is because you were poorly educated. But don't worry. We are poorly educated too." Double whammy. What's worse is I think that kid was trying to make you feel better. At work, project management undercut and mismanaged a project so badly. They pushed getting minimum viable product out with the goal to roll out improvements later. Product released. They all patted themselves on the back and moved on. Then that minimum viable product broke. In a meeting we had with our directors about how it's so broken and the cost to fix it, etc., no cost too big, unlimited manpower, etc., I asked how come we couldn't afford to do it right, but we can afford to do it twice. They pushed getting minimum viable product out with the goal to roll out improvements later. Do you work for Bethesda? I wish. Unfortunately, I don't think my story is that uncommon in any tech companies. I'll never forget the moment a family walked into the local pub I was working at while I was working. This big king of the grill, bald alpha patriarch dad type, and his wife and kids came through. I said, "Welcome. Where would you like to sit?" And he snapped back, "Well, a table would be nice." And without missing a beat at all I replied, "Actually, we usually sit on the chairs here." I'll never forget the satisfaction of that moment or the look on his face. Haha. You are the alpha dad now. My uncles were bitching about my dad, so I walked into the conversation and told them it wasn't polite to talk about people behind their backs. My uncle turned to me and said I shouldn't interrupt when the men are speaking, and completely out of character I replied, "I don't see any men in here." Boy, did I get some speep that day, but that's how I knew I won that exchange. I worked in cell phone sales for a few years, and a woman came in with a fairly new flip phone. This was 2018, we just still sold them. She was complaining cause one of the sides of the screen was dangling off and said she didn't do anything, it just snapped, and demanded a new phone. I told her that looks like physical damage and we don't have any coverage for that since you didn't buy a phone protection warranty. She insisted it wasn't physical damage and the phone just sucks and broke itself. She started freaking out and calling me all kinds of names and swinging her phone in my face, and then the top half of the phone literally snapped off and landed on the counter in front of me. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "Well, that was definitely physical damage." She lost her speep at my comment, and it was weirdly satisfying. Working retail, a Karen once told me she hoped I die. I was so into work mode that I blankly responded, "I mean, we all die. That's not much of a threat." Maybe it was my lack of intimidation or blank stare, but that really shut her up. Maybe you reminded her of her own mortality. Sometimes it can make you stop and wonder if what you are doing is really worth it. I didn't realize the nature of my comment when I wrote it. But in high school, one of my teachers did end of the year anonymous evaluations. Everyone hated him. And I understood why, but I still did well in his class. I wrote, "I don't have any critiques about your teaching. But I think you should work on being a better person." Dude. How old were you? That line would have definitely destroyed me if I had been your teacher. Forensic biology professor brings out a fresh human brain as a surprise to a stunned class. You have no idea what I had to go through to get this. The skull. The janitor stopped by at the wrong time. When I was 12, my older sister had a boy over for Thanksgiving dinner. She dated lots of douches. But this guy took the cake. Big. Brash. Annoying dickhead who was rude to her and basically everyone. As we sat down for dinner, before we were about to say what we were thankful for, he says inaudible moron grunts, "Ha, looks like I'm seated at the head of the table. Must be important," with a huge speep-eating grin. Without pausing, I gestured to my dad seated opposite him and said, "Actually, my dad is at the head of the table. You're the asshole." My mom scolded me for swearing at the table, but years later told me her and my dad thought it was hilarious. After 4 years in an abusive relationship and 1 year of an abusive marriage, I told my ex that I wanted a divorce. He told me that I couldn't divorce him or I'd go to hell. My response was, "Well, I guess I'll see you there." I then kicked him out of my house, for which he had never paid a dime in bills, and told him to call his mom for a plane ticket. Not the most badass story here, but it felt good. I was around 17 or 18 and getting my first filling at the dentist. They pumped me up with nitrous oxide for pain and to help me relax during the procedure. Dentist came back and asked me, "How are you feeling?" All I said was, "I don't," and he lost his speep and cracked up for what seemed like 20 minutes before he could pull himself together. I also started cracking up because of the laughing gas, and his laugh was infectious. So we were both just sitting in the room laughing, and all his assistants came by and were very confused, LOL. Not me. My daughter. This boy at school called her retarded. Her response? "No. I'm autistic." I don't know what your beeping excuse is. She was in 6th grade. I was pretty shocked when I got that phone call. She usually doesn't say things to people. Then, of course, you asked what happened to the other boy. I absolutely did. They said that he would be punished appropriately. They wouldn't tell me anything else. I worked at Target back in college in a stocking job where we had to be there at like 4 to 5 a.m. to unload trucks. One morning I overslept a bit and walked to the unpacking line about 10 minutes late, eating a breakfast bar. The boss stormed over and started loudly berating me in front of everyone for being late. As he was going on, I was listening and taking bites of the bar without much expression, mainly because I was so damn tired. It finally bothered him that I was disrespectfully chewing during the yelling, and he stopped mid-sentence, held out his hand, and said, "Give me that damn thing." It just happened that I only had one bite left, so I took it, handed him the wrapper, and said thanks with a mouthful of food. He paused and started laughing at the ridiculous response to his bitching. We were buddies after that. Young male. Traveling with a bunch of other males. Border Patrol. We were being searched for drug smuggling. Border Patrol agent. You know I have the authority to cavity search you. Me somehow without skipping a beat. Sure, you might. But neither of us would enjoy it, and you wouldn't find anything. Off the hook. No fingers in my butt? A couple months ago, my now ex-friend was telling me all the things that were wrong with me. And she finished it with, "At least I don't have to wear makeup to look pretty." I was so fed up with her speep. So I responded, "At least I am capable of looking pretty." She was speechless and I felt like such a badass because this was the first time I ever stood up to her. I was accused of being passive-aggressive. I replied, which part sounded passive? I don't ever want to come across as passive. My take on this is I'm aggressive. Back in high school I was a slow fat kid. For PE we'd jog about a km to the beach, have a swimming lesson, then jog back. I was the last one back to the school grounds and the teacher was standing at the gate. He told me that cause I was too slow he was going to lock the gate and I'd have to jog to the next one 200 m away. I said that I'd consider him locking me out of school grounds to be a suspension and just go home. He let me in straight away. Kinda wished he'd tried calling my bluff so I could have followed through and just gone home. I already posted here, but I just thought of another story. There was this one extremely attractive girl in my COM 101 class in college. One day, for a project where we interviewed other students, I was partnered with her. We ended up not finishing our questions in class. So I asked her if I could meet her somewhere to finish interviewing her. She said yes. Fast forward to the next day. I meet her after her dance group finishes rehearsal. I knock through the last few questions. And the final one which I ask is, what do you perceive the future to hold? She replies, I don't even know what I'm having for dinner tonight. I have no idea what the future holds. So I say, well, if you don't know what you're having for dinner, do you want to have dinner with me? She laughed. Said yes. And though we only hooked up that night, I still look back on that day as one of the best dating stories I've had yet. I worked at a bookstore and a customer asked me how often do the periodicals come out. I deadpanned periodically. And he asked to speak to my manager. Worth it? Kind of a proud moment for me. I was always really shy in school. Had very few friends. Was bullied a lot. My mum passed away when I was 14 and I kept it to myself. Not wanting sympathy or more bullying for it. Someone found out. Not sure how. They then said in one of our mutual classes that I should just die like my stupid mum did. The whole class heard and was shocked. Even the teacher was like a deer in headlights. I immediately got up to leave, but before I left, I turned to her, got up close and said, I've seen what cancer does to people. It hurts. And I would never wish that on anyone. Not even you. And I turned and walked out. A lot of people have me some respect for the fact that I stood up to myself. Although people then knew my mum had died. Which wasn't great. I ended up leaving the school a few months later anyways, but I was glad that I stood up for myself. Go wait with mommy, daddy might be going back to jail again. Guy pushed my 5-year-old daughter at the fish store and she started crying. When he heard me say that, he ran out of the store. I've never been to jail before. Edit. Grammar. Who would push a 5-year-old girl? Do you also look intimidating? That line would never work coming from me. I look like the treasurer of a Mumford & Sons fan club. If you can't look intimidating, look crazy. We had an overly dramatic neighbor who always claimed she was sick and dying. My mom came to see my kids in the middle of battling stage 4 lung cancer. The neighbor pulled her. Hi Rita. So glad to see you. Did Jason tell you that I am dying? My mom looked right at her, smiled and said, me too, dear. But not today. Never more proud of her. My cousin had cancer, he's doing okay now. But someone outside a shop was raising money and said kids with cancer. My auntie replied, no thanks. I've already got one. It went down in family history. This one had a little setup, but I think it's funny enough to share. At a family vacation, my grandmother was giving me grief for not remembering her birthday. I've never been good with birthdays. After telling me it was the password to her iPhone, she wanted me to take a picture with it, which is why I needed the password. While she was distracted, I opened up the settings, changed her password to my birth date, and then set her phone down. Cue 15 minutes later. She's trying to get into her phone and it's not working. Suspecting mischief, she grumpily asks me if I've changed the password to her phone in front of our entire family. I admit that I did. Well, what is it? She asked impatiently. It's my birth date. She sat there in stunned silence for about 15 seconds, not being able to remember my birthday, before our family exploded laughing. Was a good time. I was eating McDonald's with a few friends and I started choking. The only thing I managed to say in the whole ordeal was, I'm McChokin. When I was 7, some girls were bullying me at school. I just learned the word mutual. One of the bullies said, we don't like you, and I said the feeling's mutual and then walked off. I'm 37 now and I still remember it. Around the time I was 12, I was at a family party with my dad and aunts/uncles. My dad told me that one of my uncles owned several bars. My response? Oh. It's good that he got into a business that he knows something about. I had no idea what I really was saying. I thought I was giving him a compliment. I did something similar around the same age. My parents were meeting up with my mom's siblings to go paint my grandparents' house. That included my Uncle Dave, who was known to everyone to be a pretty heavy drinker. My mom got a water jug we owned out of the cupboard, probably to put water in for everyone while working. And I looked at it and said, oh, is that for Dave's beer? To an aggressive colleague, I have to repeat myself to my son 20 times a day too. But he's 3 years old. What's your excuse? Got to work one morning. My chosen football team had thrashed my boss's chosen team. I gave him a load of speep for it, humorously of course. My boss is great. He gave me some speep back, and told me to do a stock take on all items we have beginning with the letter C. I pointed at him and said, 1. Luckily, he took it the correct way and laughed a lot. Long story short, my friend would share my sexcapades with other people, which I would rather he didn't. Got fed up and ended up blurting out, just because you don't have your own stories to share doesn't mean you have to share mine. This one's my favorite. In middle school I had a class simply called reading class. That was taught by a conservative Christian lady. I was reading Jurassic Park and the teacher asked to see my book. I compiled like a good student. The next day she gave it back and said, "You can no longer read this book in this class because they use God's name in vain." I looked at her square in the eye and replied, "Wouldn't you cuss if dinosaurs were chasing after you?"